we've seen more economic growth when our tax rates are higher.
How did you just get this information? That's just complete bullshit. Taxes are low, they don't invest more. So it
Yes.
doesn't make any sense.
Which is exactly what
Why
happens. When you tax corporations more, they tend to reinvest their profits rather than attempt to hoard them. And when you reinvest into a business, business investment is typically what creates GDP, because that's going to create more jobs. It's going to create higher wages for the people working those jobs. I believe in like strengthening social programs, things like universal health care, high wages, free education. I believe in like social rights, like I'm pro LGBTQ, pro abortion.
But don't you think that's kind of utopia?
Um,
Free education, free educate system, like you have to get the money somewhere.
yeah, taxation.
Yeah, so you would make people poor but educated.
Well, plenty of countries have a free higher education system, and people aren't poor in those countries.
Yeah, but usually it's like if you want to make the education cheaper or free, you have to take the money from somewhere else, military.
Sure, I would just
Healthcare.
fund it through taxation. I mean, you could fund it in a multitude of ways. You could tax the wealthy, you could tax corporations, you could tax Wall Street, like stock
Yeah, but
trades.
that would make the state kind of vulnerable to like the arrival of things from other countries.
And how so?
Because if you tax the corporations more, then they won't survive as long.
Well, that's never been true. And actually, in America, we've seen more economic growth when our tax rates are higher.
How did you just get this information? That's just complete bullshit.
I mean, that's absolutely
It
just true.
doesn't make that doesn't make any sense. You do the taxes higher,
Yes.
and the economical situations becomes better. That's what you're saying.
Yes, because when you tax corporations more, they tend to reinvest their profits rather than attempt to hoard them. And when you reinvest into a business, business investment is typically what creates GDP, because that's going to create more jobs. It's going to create higher wages for the people working those jobs, who then have more money to spend. So it creates a better velocity of money, which is when money exchanges hands between business and consumer, and that adds more to the GDP. So typically,
Yeah.
we've seen much higher GDP when the tax rates are the highest.
Okay, so the corporations doesn't make as much money, and they reinvest more. How does that make sense?
So, yeah, because if we're taxing the profits they receive, then in order to evade the taxes and rather just make more money in the long term, they can invest it back into their business. And then those profits can push over to the next year, and then they can push over to the next year, and so on and so forth, to where they're making profits to where they're not getting taxed at the higher rate, but they're continuing to make more. And this also pushes more money into the hands of the consumers. Like, for instance, I just pulled this up real quick, like just to make the point again, when our taxes are higher, we've seen more GDP. When the highest GDP we've seen is on average 4.5. And that's when our highest tax rate was between 75 and 80%.
Yeah, but isn't like the GDP higher because logically the taxes are higher?
No, taxes wouldn't create higher GDP. GDP is like business investment, business transactions, things like that.
I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense. If the taxes are bigger, why would they invest more? That doesn't make any sense, because that means that if the taxes are low, they don't invest more. So it
Yes.
doesn't make any sense.
Which is exactly what
Why
happens. When taxes are low, the corporations typically hoard the money and use it on things like stock buybacks, or they save it, or whatever. It doesn't ever trickle down, which is why there's less GDP when taxes are lower.